Bob, a quick policy question. We don't do the shopping center, do we?
I know, but the shopping center is just building a contract.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you that.
Oh, yeah, they're working on it right now.
I mean, that's yesterday, pretty bad.
Yeah, they're making progress. And we have a contract on Harrison Street today.
Oh, good. Okay, but the shopping center, I think is like, you know, that's what I wondered, do they not want to spend the money?
They're not pursuing it, they just
Started on Friday next week.
I have the sign-up sheet, but don't worry. We'll just start with people who are on here and we'll open it to everybody else.
Should I go ahead and start?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
All right. Okay. Good evening. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, have we met the requirements for the noticing of this meeting?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, and please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Mr. Liverman?
Here.
Ms. Butler?
Present.
Mr. Simon is absent, and Mayor Lemper.
Here. And now please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we start this evening, I just had a few announcements. The first one is that the Avalon Bay Developers Agreement is going to be on the agenda for the April 7th meeting. If you come here to speak about that, you're welcome to do that during the public comment period, which will be coming up in just a second. But we won't be able to, council will not be able to discuss it or take formal action on it tonight. That's going to be on April 7th. The other announcement is that we had originally scheduled a meeting for April 14th. That has been canceled because it conflicts with the Jewish holiday, but we'll be having meetings on April 21st and April 28th. And now I'd like to turn to our minutes from February 24th and March 10th. Are there any comments or corrections from those minutes?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
February 24th, in the discussion about the chief, and I'm sorry I don't have the minutes open, but the beginning of a sentence that is attributed to me, I don't quite understand, but what I did recall is that I expressed concern about our ability to restrict the search to just one person, or restrict the process to just one person, and not allow any other internal applicants to apply, and whether we'd be on solid legal footing. I think we've been reassured subsequently that we are, but at that point it was unclear. And also, did Patrick happen to send any comments to you? So the comment attributed to him also seemed a little bit odd to me, but I don't feel I can correct it about that we would be making a decision that night. I don't think there was ever any intention, unless I'm mistaken, that we would make a decision that night, because we hadn't even interviewed Captain Sutter, and we also...
I think his point was about the process, making a decision about the process.
Oh, making a decision about the process. Good. Thank you for that clarification. And then, okay. Great, thank you. Then I think that does stand, although I don't know if you want to maybe make that just a little bit clearer. Great, thank you. And then, if no one has any other, do you want me to move?
Correction to March 10th.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
But do you understand what the what was the proposed change then? You understand what that is?
yeah, I think, yes. Okay. I think she got it.
All right. And Mr. Miller?
I have an addition to the March 10th minutes, and that is that at the end of the discussion about the report by Dr. Whitman, I addressed a question to him. I said to Dr. Whitman, you're a licensed professional engineer, and if this was a court of law and you were giving your testimony as a licensed engineer, would the testimony that you gave, would the report that you gave, constitute your final report to counsel? And his answer was yes. And I would like that included in the minutes.
Yep, Ms. Butler?
March 10th. I have a question about the order. It looked to me, the potholes discussion came at the very end of the evening, and somehow it looks like it had jumped ahead of the report by the LSRP. I just wondered if we could put that in its proper order. Right, there was a... Well, then on page 5, let's see.
The pothole report is on page 5.
No, let's see. Well, so on page 3, just before we start the Avalon Bay discussion, it says Ms. Crumiller offered a motion to approve Mr. Huff's proposal for pothole repair. And also, Areta brought up the, in her comments, there's just a typo. It should say 1960. The 9 is missing. There's just a little typo. Page 4, under Areta Polinsky's comments, it should say, it says 1060, it should say 1960. Yep.
Are there any other changes, or is there a motion to approve with as amended?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so both sets of minutes with those amendments have passed. Thank you. And now I'd like to open the floor for public comment. I have one sign up on the sheet that was on the podium. I know some people came in after the sheet was removed. So we'll start with Areta Polinsky, who had signed up, and then I'll open it up to other people who'd like to speak. We do have a full agenda tonight, so I'd ask that you'd limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Always. Areta Polinsky, Harris Road. On Saturday at the Witherspoon-Jackson meeting, can you hear me? Okay, sorry. On Saturday at the Witherspoon-Jackson meeting, we learned that an inspection of Avalon Bay's demolition could be expected through funds from the developer's escrow. A figure of 5% of $3 million was cited. My questions are, an inspector, one inspector, or would it be multiple inspectors? Because there are different areas of expertise that would be at issue. So would there be expertise in terms of asbestos abatement inspection? Would there be expertise in terms of lead-based paint abatement? Would there be inspection of soils? Would there be an inspector that would have expertise in plumbing lines, meaning the drain lines and septic? And of course, from a safety perspective, would there be inspection by someone with skills in structure, building structure, meaning that it would come down safely? What was cited was in the planning board resolution a requirement for this, and I'm at a loss as to where that is. The closest I could find is under paragraph I2. As per the municipal land use law, the applicant shall post a performance guarantee with the municipality of Princeton for the installation of the required on-site improvements along with any required inspection fees. So my question is that where the independent inspector would be paid from?
Mr. Kaiser, can I rely on you to answer this one?
Yes, thank you. That escrow is a 5% amount of the performance guarantee that's posted. And the engineering department would work with the building department and bring on an inspector as needed. Don't know if it's going to be one or we may have a couple at a time as the work progresses to monitor that work. And we'll see that those inspectors have the proper expertise as the work is progressing.
So at what point will the public be aware of what is included in this?
Well, as the work proceeds, we will, I'm sure, be reporting to council, advising them as to the status of the work and how things are going and who we have on site monitoring the work.
Okay, thank you. I want to make sure we have time to hear from everybody tonight.
I'm Dr. Sam Hamid, own property at 282, 84, 86 Witherspoon Street, Princeton. I want to thank you all for taking the time to hear us and allow us to ask questions of you. And Mr. Kaiser, thank you for trying to cooperate with us as much as you could within the amount of knowledge that you have. So we thank you, many of us. And I apologize for not getting to the meeting on Saturday, but something came up in the way of an emergency, so I couldn't be there. But I think the key words here are going to be, in the future, for all concerned, for our well-being and Princeton's well-being, integrity and transparency. And transparency is going to be the key, because we're hoping and expecting and we're requesting of you that you realize as citizens we need to be part of this whole process since we're the ones living in that area. But we speak not just for ourselves in Witherspoon Jackson, but we speak for the whole community of Princeton, because we do need to know, all of us need to know. I talked to an older attorney who doesn't live in that area, but who said, I want to know what's going on. I use Witherspoon Street. I mean, there's no way I can get anywhere except on Witherspoon, and I need to go down to see the city hall. I need to get here. I need to get there. And I can't imagine what it's going to be like on Bayard Lane. I said, well, I'll bring this up tonight. He said, please do. This is a man you all know, but I don't want to name him at this point. But he's an extremely well-respected attorney, and he said, we all need to know. So he said, transparency. I said, I agree with you. So I bring that to you. We do need that transparency, and we hope that you will look into the situation, especially you, Mr. Kaiser, and others. Mr. Floyd mentioned to me today, are there good ordinances about demolition? And when Merwick was demolished, there wasn't the demolition plan that he could find when he went to your office. And your second or third in command said, I don't know. So I think we need to know if there are ordinances locally, not just statewide, that relate to demolition, and what those ordinances are. If they're not here, we request that you create some that will be protective of the citizenry, the children certainly, and the communities, and the overall safety and health of Princeton itself. I'm speaking more slowly tonight because of your 2-minute, 3-minute thing, and I spoke so fast last night. Someone said, you spoke so fast, I didn't know what you were saying. Mr. Miller, that conversation you had, was that a private conversation, or was that, I didn't hear that publicly that day from Dr. Whitman that he would have stood by that report, because when Mr. Simon said, is that the report you would have made? He said, no. He said, that wasn't my report. That was the one I negotiated. And I'm concerned, Mr. Kaiser, you have to look into this. Who gave him that right to negotiate? Because I don't think, Mr. Schmier, he has that legal right, and no one gave it to him. I don't think you did, Mayor. I know Mr. Kaiser didn't. I know Mr. Simon was shocked. So we all were. So in any case, I don't want to talk anymore. I've used 2.5 minutes of my 3 minutes time. I thank you. I do hope that you will keep in mind transparency and integrity and responsibility to the citizenry, because we do depend upon you. As you depend on us to pay our taxes, and honor you, and we do honor you. In return, you have to honor us. Respect goes both ways. So thank you for taking the time. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask me?
Dr. Hamid, in interest of the 3 points that you made, I did specifically raise the question with Dr. Whitman, as I cited it a moment ago. I said to Dr. Whitman, this is not a court of law. You're
Right.
not giving expert witness testimony. But if you were giving expert witness testimony, would the report that you gave accurately describe the final report? And his answer was yes.
I thought that's what you were saying, and I believe that's what you said. And I remember something about that. In that case, then I think you have to ask Mr. Kaiser why he had a report we never saw. And we all need to see that report, the original report, not the negotiated one, so we know exactly what he said. And so far, we don't know. And have you seen that report yet, Mr. Kaiser? The unedited report, the unnegotiated report?
Yeah, we're gonna have,
No,
Mr.
okay.
Simon had asked for it, and we're gonna have those recommendations before us when we bring this up on the
Because I know Mr. Simon really
7th.
wanted to see it, and of course, we all would like to see it too. Again,
Yeah, we understand that.
we want to participate with you, not against you. We're part of the same team, okay?
Yeah, no,
Thank
we
you.
understand. Thank you.
I'm Martha Friedman, 96 Jefferson Road. I live right behind the Franklin lot. I also have concerns about the demolition of the hospital. There's many trucks that are parked there every day on the Franklin lot. I don't know if they're working with the hospital demolition, preparing for it. But I'd like you to be aware of any noise pollution that goes on, because the beeping of the trucks goes on all the time. And as the demolition proceeds, that's going to continue, and I'm just wondering if there's any way that that can be changed so that they don't have the beeping of the trucks all the time. So the noise pollution is one concern that I have. The second concern is from the previous speaker about all the lead, that's going to be happening, the lead paint, the asbestos, the dust control, and I'd like to make sure that there's plenty of oversight for that. We have children walking back and forth to all the schools up Franklin, and those children are going to be affected. There's many children living on Jefferson and Harrison Road, and I'm really concerned about the dust and the asbestos and the lead that is going to be in the air. So I know that there was a report, and I would also like some transparency on that report. I'd like to see what's going on with that. And my biggest concern is for the children walking back and forth. And also, do we have a date for the demolition yet? Is there a date set?
No, because we haven't yet agreed with the developers agreement, and the demolition plan is referenced in that.
Is that going to be discussed at the next meeting, the demolition plan?
The developers agreement is what gets voted on by council. The demolition plan is something that's approved by staff, but there's elements of that we know are important to the public, so we're discussing that, and conditions on that will be appended to the developers agreement when we discuss it on the 7th.
Okay. And is there any discussion with the schools about this at all? I mean, is there any back and forth with the schools and the children walking and how safe that's going to be? Are they participating in this?
We've had discussions with them, yeah, and certainly we'll be in communication with them about when the demolition is happening.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mayor, could I, the trucks in the Franklin lot now, I believe, belong to contractors who are working for the university at Merwick, and they're using the lot and shuttling them to Merwick, so to keep them off the other municipal streets from parking in neighborhoods, et cetera. So that's what that is currently. Mr. Kaiser made an announcement at the Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood meeting on Saturday that I think maybe he should make again tonight, because it does affect some demolition or decommissioning, I guess, of the building that might begin to take place, and I think will be of interest to the neighbors.
Right, before, just the trucks that will be involved with Avalon Bay it's specified in the developer's agreement that they would have to park in the garage not in the Franklin lot.
Yes, if I could comment, Madam Mayor. On Saturday, I advised the neighborhood group that we have been advised by Avalon Bay that they were planning to come in this week to start removing items from the hospital. And this is something that doesn't require any type of permit. They just simply notified us that they would be coming in to remove doors, remove some carpeting, remove some built-in desks and so forth. There's no permit required, and they intend to be working on that this week. So there may be some trucks there on site. There's no need for a fence to be installed at this point because they will not be doing any demolition work, just simply removing those type of items from the hospital.
I've been doing a lot of online research about the lead in the air and things that are going to happen, and there's discussion about doors and trim and things like that being removed and how much dust is in the air from the lead that's in the paint. So perhaps there should be some kind of monitoring of that beginning now if they're removing things. That's my suggestion, my desire. If you could follow up on that, please.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Paul Driscoll, and I've seen quite a few of you on Saturday, so I'd like to elaborate on two discussions we had on Saturday. The first concerns the necessary environmental testing for the underground drains. The current plan, agreed to by Avalon Bay, is to limit testing for heavy metals to one underground drain from the incinerator room, and only if it is cracked, and 2 spots on soil corresponding to the second set of incinerator stacks. But this does not include the many other underground drains on the 5.6-acre site or any of the drains which are snaking through the existing buildings. All drains should be tested as some could contain mercury. I understand that there are prescribed procedures for dismantling hospitals due to the existence of so many plumbing lines throughout the buildings. Some sort of careful procedure should be followed, and critical testing should not be limited. And the second issue I have is actually related to sewers, which you remember John Armonia spoke to you about on Saturday. And he asked me he can't be here tonight, he asked me to ask Bob Kaiser if there's an intention to delete the 8-inch sewer line going to Witherspoon Street. I'm specifically speaking on behalf of him. Will there only be one hookup for Avalon Bay on Henry Avenue?
I can't answer that. Jack West is much more familiar with those plans than I am, but we can get back to you on response to that question.
It's because I think we have to remember and keep in mind that there always was, there's been a history of overflow of sewage into the houses on Henry Avenue. And, I mean, John Armonia said it all Saturday. But he hasn't forgotten, believe me, because I talked to him this afternoon and he'd be here if he could be. So, I'm sure that question's going to come up again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Linda Auerbach. I have no comments. I just have a couple of questions tonight from 10 Lytle Street. I have a copy of the Whitman, this is merely a 5 or 6 page document, the LSRP expert report regarding environmental issues, prepared for the municipality of Princeton, March 2014. I just have a fundamental question. Mr. Kaiser, what is it that distinguishes a hospital site from an industrial site, and thereby does not put Avalon Bay in the position of having to do a site-wide remediation? Or in general, what is the distinction, given the proximity of so many private residences to this particular site? Is the basis for qualifying something as an industrial site its proximity to residential areas, or the nature of the industry that was conducted, or possible hazardous materials? What is the basis for the distinction?
Dr. Whitman can certainly respond to that question much better
Okay.
than I can, but it's my understanding that it's just simply what occurred on the site, industrial processing facility versus a hospital, and they're treated differently.
So the assumption is that the hospital would more than likely not contain as many or the same types of hazardous materials as might be contained in industrial sites?
It has to do with the NJDEP rules and regulations, and again, Dr. Whitman is an expert in that particular
Okay.
area.
My other question was, according to this report, now I don't know whether this is his final report, whether it's a condensation of a larger report that he submitted to you or not, but I just have a question. In part 2.1.2 on page 4 of this document, regarding site-wide versus area of concern, parenthesis AOC, it says, therefore, at a site with leaking USTs, what are USTs? I've forgotten.
Underground storage tanks.
Thank you. The responsible party may address and remediate the leaking tanks without addressing or remediating the remainder of the property, unless there are other known or suspected discharges. Has that been more elaborated on in a larger report by Mr. Whitman? What is meant by unless there are other known or suspected discharges?
I would prefer to have Dr. Whitman respond to those questions.
I don't think I had another question. Let me just check here quickly. Thank you, by the way, for your helping me out here.
And I'm not sure when in the meeting you came in, but we're going to be having the main discussion on Avalon Bay at our April 7th meeting when
understand
Dr.
that.
Whitman will be here.
But just, I'm glad to hear that. I wasn't aware that he would be here. And the other question I had was, you said the April 14th town council meeting would not be held owing to the holiday. Why aren't there meetings every 2 weeks generally?
Right, every other Monday. But we're having three Monday meetings in April, so the 7th, the 21st, and the 28th.
Okay. So, but there would normally have been a meeting on the 14th?
Right, and not on the 7th.
So there couldn't be a meeting scheduled for that week, say on the 15th?
I tried, but it's difficult when there's 7 council members to get everybody
I
here.
understand.
So we've tried.
Well, thank you very much. And so Mr. Whitman will be here on the 7th? And will he also be here the 21st that anyone knows of? Okay.
Not at this moment, no.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Okay, seeing none, then well,
I want to make one point clear, as Mr. Floyd just pointed out to me. That's exactly what Mr. Floyd and I were concerned about. Are there ordinances or not? And you referred to Mr. West and others. We need to find out from you, Mr. Kaiser, and others, if there are ordinances that govern these things a little more thoroughly than just general, we're not sure, and we want to refer to Mr. Whitman, because Mr. Whitman made very clear that night he's not qualified in certain areas. And the truth is, as you said that day, and as Ms. Polinsky pointed out, you paid a little and you got a little. That's the reality. We all know enough about politics and economics to know you get what you pay for if you don't pay a lot. Not that we should pay him a lot, because I really don't want to have him come back, frankly. I want an expert to come back who knows about hospital demolition. So Mr. Kaiser, as I told you in the meeting we had with you, I do think, and I want the council to hear what I'm saying, think about whether this is the expert that you want to rely upon in case lawsuits come, because they can come.
One thing I'd like to respond to, and that is there's a question as to what governs demolition. It's the BOCA code. It's the state requirements that our building department enforces, and they are guided by the rules and regulations of the BOCA code.
And I'd also like to say that Dr. Whitman is considered one of the top LSRPs in the state, and we have our engineer is the best in the state as well. So I feel everybody on council feels very well served by our engineering department. Okay, is there anybody else who'd like to comment? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to close public comment. Thank you. And tonight is the night that we're going to be introducing our budget, and I would like to ask for Ms. Webb, our CFO, to come, and also Kathy Monzo, to come walk us through our budget for 2014. We're going to switch around with everybody's indulgence and do the presentation and discussion first from the Princeton First Aid and Rescue Squad, because y'all are here. And so, Bob, are you leading us through this one, or is Mark coming up? Or both of you? Okay.
Now would be a good time to comment.
Okay, and while you're getting set up, I know this has been a really busy week for PFARs and for the fire department and for the police department, and I want to thank all the volunteers here tonight and everybody who's not here tonight for keeping our community safe. So thank you for the work that you do.
Okay, as soon as that shows up there, we'll be raring to go. Okay, over the past, I'll say, several years, both before consolidation and certainly afterwards, we've been having off and on discussions with PFARs with regards to trying to work with them to find a place, an adequate place for them to construct a new facility. And the goal of the most recent meetings was to try to facilitate this construction somewhere in an area to the extent possible that be centrally located in the community, would allow them adequate response time, and it would also then be located closer to our other emergency service providers. So that was one of the general guides that we were using when we tried to come up with what the recommendation is going to be tonight. The current Twin W, there's a flashback from when I was in West Windsor. That's bad. Wow. Okay, excuse me, everybody in the back there. It's tough getting old. Because I've been down this road one more time. Everything in life is circular. Their current facility is antiquated at best. I don't know how many people have been through the facility, but certainly I'm sure that Mark and some of his colleagues would love to take you through if you haven't gone through. The bays are undersized. There are insufficient bays to handle their current equipment needs. The administrative areas are far lacking for what they need to be in the year 2014 and beyond. Sleeping quarters need to be upgraded and the like. There's not a part of this building that really functions at any degree of a high level, given how old it is. I'm just going to give you a couple of highlighted pictures of it so that everybody is kind of familiar with what it looks like, if I can get this thing to move. Okay. Okay, I'm escaping. There we go. All right, beautiful. This is the current facility, which shows not only the squad house, which is on the left, but the two properties that they have purchased, the two white Cape Cods on Clearview that they have purchased. Now they're using those kind of ancillary to the actual squad function for staffing and et cetera. But the idea was they were purchasing those properties so that they could gain enough property at this site in which to hopefully expand. You're going to see later on that doesn't necessarily work, but that was the initial drive behind them. And these are just close-up pictures of those two facilities. Moreover, the concerns that I think we see is how jammed this equipment is in the storage bays. When this building was constructed, ambulances were more like glorified station wagons. You know, they were a hearse-type vehicle, only you were alive. You know, they were made by Cadillac. You know, so the new facility just doesn't facilitate this in any way. You can see with the working areas in between the rigs that they have, as well as on the sides, is really lacking. Plus, backing them in is probably a challenge. I know it used to be at some of the firehouses with the bigger fire trucks, too. As far as office space, this is shared office space here with 12 of the officers in the squad. So hopefully nobody needs to work at the same time. The duty crew, again, they're utilizing an area of the facility that was not necessarily designed for this, and when you start to look at all of the functional needs that we have today, they weren't even envisioned or in anybody's eyesight back in the, what was this built, the 60s?
1963.
63. Outside shed, that's being kind to this. This is a kind of a building that covers one of the vehicles that the squad uses, their special service vehicle. So this building is very, very limited. That's the crux of the matter. I do want to make one comment that I think the squad has done an absolutely amazing job at making this building function for as long as they have. And I think you don't get a real sense of that unless you're really in the building to see what they're working under, you know, on a day-by-day basis. They also didn't in any way foresee that they'd be operating a paid personnel staffing situation out of this building back in 1963. So there's a lot that has happened. So we did look at a lot of options over the years. We looked at building at this current site that we talked about. We looked at building across the street on the Valley Road school site, which presented all kinds of other issues. On some other yet-to-be-found site, we looked around to see what properties might or might not be available, but there wasn't anything that was really appropriate, nor probably affordable, given the you know, the limited budget. And so we have settled, and you're going to see on the former Municipal Public Works facility, which is right at the corner of Valley Road and 206. If you walk out the door to the police station, the building that used to be utilized for the township's public works back in the day. What we would do, and the recommendation is that we would construct on that building a new facility. And the reason for this is that the location is about as good as you can get in the town. It's centrally located, and you know, as realtors say, location, location, location. Well, this is the location. We don't have any real current use for that facility. We have taken out all of our public works equipment. We used to use it for storage, et cetera, and for some maintenance, but all of the maintenance function for Public Works has been moved down to Harrison Street, so we don't have any current need for that facility. Another big factor is it puts this project under local control now. When we had looked at other areas, such as potentially the Valley Road school site, that was fraught with other kinds of issues. This allows us to move forward with the project. It also allows us to clean up that site, which is, one, it's aesthetically not exactly what you'd like to have next to your beautiful municipal building, but we also do have some remediation that we as the town are liable for underneath the building, so we would take care of that as part of this project. To me, this really does turn out to be a win-win for both the squad and for the town. Since we already know about the cleanup obligation, you know, we would end up taking down that facility, the current building. We would do the cleanup underneath. The engineering office has been working on that project in bits and pieces over the past couple years. And there are 3 pieces of property on that area, and those would be melded together into a single parcel. One of the challenges we have with the project is to look at how we would handle the traffic in that area, going from 3 entrances, exits, / whatever you want to call them, onto 206 within about a 300 or 400 yard range. So we do need to look at that engineering and see what we need to modify with that, and that'll have to be done in accordance with the state. But we see that more as a challenge and not really an obstacle. The first step in trying to move this project forward, and the purpose of tonight, is we'd like to enter into a memorandum, or the administration is going to recommend that we enter into a memorandum of understanding with the squad. That allows them to understand that there's some support. Doesn't mean that, all of the issues have been resolved. We're going to have issues that are going to pop up and, along the way that we'll have to jointly solve. But we want to know that we are all headed in the same direction, that we want to make this project work to the extent that it's feasible. And both Mark and I have been working on this a while, and I think we both think it's very, very feasible. What it would do is it would form a partnership between us and the squad, which I think is important. It's important for us, it's important for them, because then we're working on something together. It's not the squad wants to build something and we want a different type of facility. So I think it's very, very important that we continue to look at this as a partnership. So critical points when we get the MOU finalized, and it's pretty much done now. We've been working on it, back and forth, trading various language changes, and we've been working with Ed's office also. So I think we're fairly close. But PFARS would provide to us their existing 3 properties. Those would eventually come to the community. Now you may ask, okay, so why do we want those? Why do we not want them? We don't know what we might build there, but as an example, 2 examples. One is you could eventually say that the property is surplus. You could sell it in the free market, get whatever you can get dollar-wise. But it is also very difficult for the governing body, any governing body, to go out and purchase property for any kind of public purpose. So let's say with the new COA regulations, something comes out and we have a higher obligation. Well, now we have an opportunity to provide for a portion of that should we have it, and we could do it on that site once the squad moves out. But that's a decision down the line that the community can make. But there's a value to that property for us to accept it from them, and it also helps with the financials for the squad. So there's, again, a mutual benefit there. We would provide to them a long-term land lease, similar to what the borough did when we did the redevelopment project for the library, the 2 buildings at the library and the parking garage. So there'd be a long-term land lease. We would not give up ownership of the land. We can't build the project unless we own the property it's on. Somewhere down the line, if we choose to do that, again, that you can choose to do that way, way down the line, but we would end up owning the property for a period of time. This allows PFARS to begin their fundraising. Unlike we talked today a little bit about the pool project, where that was really at a go stage, and then we started the fundraising, which makes it a little more difficult. Now they will have a site. They can begin to look at the challenges that they face to design something, but on a parallel track, they can start to fundraise for the project. Again, very critical to them so that they understand how much money they can estimate coming in that will help offset the debt that ultimately they're going to be responsible for paying back to the town. Which brings us to how the project would be financed. We would be the financing entity for the project. Again, going back, it is our property. We would finance it. We can save the squad hundreds of thousands of dollars over the term of a loan with the financing rates that we would get versus what they could get out on a commercial market. The final cost to PFARS would be the total construction cost, including the soft cost, less whatever they raise, and less the value of the land. And I'll just give you kind of a for instance there in a second. But the completed building facility would be controlled and operated, obviously, by the squad. They need to have that control, and just as they do with their current facility. So we would provide that for them. Now, for illustration only, and this is really purely illustration, it just kind of shows how this could play out. If the project cost, the construction cost was $6 million and the soft costs were, say, $600,000, which usually plays in that 10% range. So the total cost would be about $6.6 million to build that building over there in this example. Let's say the squad raises $2 million. The land value credit would be $1 million. That would leave PFARS to return about $3.6 million to us. All right, so we would have to come up with a payment schedule that worked with PFARS. And that's kind of one of the critical elements, and that's when you get the MOU, see, that's kind of a go, no-go point, because we want to have the confidence, and they want to have the confidence that they can pay that annual cost to us. I mean, they do have an income source, obviously, with their bill charging and everything else, but that's limited. So we want to make sure that they're comfortable. We can do either straight amortization, or should we need to in the beginning, we can structure this debt to work around what their ability is to pay, similar to what we did again for the parking garage. We came up with a scenario that allowed us to raise rates over a period of years to make sure that the debt was self-liquidating, which is kind of what we want to do here. So the next steps over the next several months is hopefully council will approve the MOU, and we're hoping we'll get at least a lot of nods that this is a good idea tonight. PFARS can then begin to do some of their preliminary work on the site, including a construction schedule, start to look at their fundraising. They would hire an architect to begin to work the project. They think they have people that they've talked to already. We would then have to turn seriously to looking at the cleanup costs and demolition of the project, and that I'm estimating to be in the $250,000 range. But it doesn't. That's one of those things that doesn't get any cheaper over the time. We're better off going in and getting that done as quickly as we can. The joint project would then go through a staff review so we could look at how they were laying it out, so we could work with DOT. Ultimately, it'll come back to the governing body for a review and a presentation, and then we would jointly go to the planning board, since this is, again, it's a joint project, to make a presentation to them. Get any comments that they have and see what can and should be incorporated into this project. The financing, again, will be managed by us. Ultimately, it'll be bonded. We'll work within the new constraints that we have adopted as far as policies, so that we can be assured of that. And again, we will have a revenue stream to offset the costs. Bid documents will be put out. I'm not sure that we can really say that'll be in several months, but hopefully it will be in a reasonably short time frame. It'll be put out the bid as a public contract. We will hold the contract because we have to as the financing agency, and then we'll manage the contract with the first aid squad. So that's where we are. So our recommendation is, we can go through, have some discussion. Mark's here to answer any real questions about the building or the process or the squad's, position on this. I think they've all been pretty supportive. I think we're all quite excited that we've gotten kind of to the threshold of the door, so we can start knocking on it and get the project built. So I'll answer any questions, or Mark can help me fill in the gaps.
Mr. Miller?
Yeah, can you go back to the slide with the numbers on it?
Yep.
Can you go back to the slide?
Yeah, I'm there. It's just not up there. Bob's asleep in the other room. He'll be up in a minute.
I was going to say, don't turn it off when you return. Okay, right, okay, this one. So, if I understand it, PFARS has a revenue stream of some sort that is expected to pay back the $3,600,000?
So those numbers are purely hypothetical.
Right.
That Bob has made up.
I mean, just purely hypothetically.
Okay. We have had a fundraising feasibility study already done. The feasibility study anticipates that in the community for this endeavor, we could probably raise in the neighborhood of $3.5 million. The 3 properties the squad currently owns are being appraised, or just were appraised. We'll have the report probably within 2 weeks. Now, when we had the squad building property appraised 9 years ago, the last time we were talking about this same property that the town owns, the value of the building was about $700,000. So I anticipate, without having seen the appraisal reports, that the appraisal value will probably, for the 3 properties, probably be somewhere generally in the $1.5 million. So theoretically, if the fundraising feasibility study is correct and we raise about the 3.5 and we have 1.5 credit, so to speak, for the properties, then the amount of money that we're not able to pay immediately has been reduced drastically. And if you float a 15 or 20-year bond, then all of a sudden that amount that's left becomes fairly doable for the squad to pay off over time. And obviously, if we were to raise more money, the squad's intent is to pay this off as quick as possible. We don't want to be owing the town money, and I'm sure you don't want us owing you money. So as much as we can raise with the fund drive, we'd like to settle the debt as quick as possible.
Well, I guess my question was about the revenue, your revenue stream apart from donations. What does that look like? Is that significant or not at all?
The revenue stream, to be perfectly honest with you, today does help the squad pretty much meet its current operating budget, plus put some money aside for capital purchases every year. So if is that going to pay the town back several $1 million in a short time period? No. Would we lean on that to help us pay back over a 15 or 20-year time period? Yes, we would.
Yeah, Mr. LeBranch?
No, thanks a lot, Bob. You've done a great job as usual. I guess this is going back for years. I mean, I've been here for years, and I know the condition of the buildings that you're in currently, and I don't think that there's any more worth deserving entity in Princeton than the Princeton First Aid Squad. I mean, not just that you guys save lives, but you're an entity that, and I hate to say it, we can't live without. I mean, it's unbelievable. Also, I think, I don't know if it was noted or not, but I think that with the new equipment that's coming out, the technology and the advancing in the future, that this stuff is going to have to be housed in a location that's going to be enclosed, and I guess temperature control, I would imagine. So, I mean, I know this seems like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money, but I do think that you guys have the potential to pay it. You guys mail us those envelopes every year. I don't know if it's once or twice a year for us to send in our donation to help out. And as you know, I do.
We know that.
We know that. Just want to state that I do. And I think that, anyone watching should feel the same way. And I think that if we work together, that, we can definitely have this paid off within 10, 15 years with no problem at all. And I don't think it'll be a burden on the taxpayers. So, like I said before, this has been going on for years. I think it's a well-deserved function here, and I'm 100% on board. I know there are specifics that have to be worked out, but I'm sure that we can come to some agreement here. Thank you.
Mr. Miller?
I'd like to commend Mark and the squad leadership for staying with us through this entire process. It's been a long one. We started this well before we were a merged community. Back when there was a borough and a township, we worked together on it for a long period of time. And in fact, Mark didn't have as much gray hair as he has now.
Thanks, Bernie.
When we started working on this. I think it's been a great cooperative effort so far to bring it to where it is today, and I'm very much in favor of going ahead and drafting an MOU so that we can proceed further with it.
Yeah, Ms. Howard? Just, Mark, it's great to have so many people from the squad here. Could you just give us a little bit, explain who's here and what percentage this is of the squad? It's just interesting to hear, as we're learning about it.
Sure. So we have a number of, well, they're all in uniform pretty much, although there's some people sitting here next to Bob Gregory and another guy down there. Some of us are in civilian clothes. But we have from cadet members to brand new members to people that have been in the squad for decades here. We have a number of members of our executive board. Bob Gregory is the president from last year. Frank Signicki is our director or chief. Greg Paulson, our deputy chief. Shannon Coe, our vice president. Mike Bonato's been in the squad for, 35 years or something like that probably, to members that have only been in, a few months to a year. Obviously, this is a very important project to the squad. The building, has been sitting there a long time. The Cadillac ambulances are long gone. It's a tight fit. We've worked with a fundraising professional, and for us to really get going, that MOU is essential. We really need to know that we have the site, because we really can't do anything until we, quote unquote, have the site. So hopefully within the next few weeks, we could be back in front of you to actually have a vote on the MOU, and then we would go out immediately, hire a fundraising professional to help us every day until we meet our goal, and really get this thing moving in high gear. But without the site locked up, we can't raise funds. Everybody's told us, don't even bother asking us, because if we don't know that you have a site, we're not going to give you money unless we know that for sure. But we're confident that we can raise enough money so that whatever debt is left, if any, will be manageable, an amount of money that's manageable for the squad to pay off over a reasonable amount of time. And if we didn't really believe that, we wouldn't be here, because we don't want to have a building built that we then have to give up. We do plan on being there for as long as possible.
Yes, thank you so much, Mark, for coming. I have a couple of questions. Do we have a tentative timeline on this? When you would expect any
That would be
things to take place?
I would expect that we'll be able to get the MOU to you within, we probably don't want to do it the night of Avalon, but at our first meeting after that, I think we're that far along, so we can have that to you for that action. And as Mark said, it's kind of a critical first step. After that, the project really ends up being kind of turned over, and we'll work it on two tracks. We'll work, the squad will take care of their end, getting a schedule made and hiring the people that they need to hire in which to start doing some work on the project. We need to move forward with looking at the site cleanup, so they'll run in tandem. So I would think one of the first orders of business will be to get a Gantt chart put together, which would show how this project can move and some of the points we need to hit, which to keep it on track.
I think I think this is great because we don't want to have deja vu all over again. Like the pool, Bob is right that the way the timing of that worked out, they really ran out of daylight to do much fundraising, and I'm happy to hear that you've already engaged a professional because I think that's key. I have a question. I don't know, maybe Scott or maybe Kathy can answer this. So if we take on additional debt for PFARs, but we'll have a payment, that still impacts our, even though it's against a planned payment, that still impacts our
debt service
and our policy, does it not? I guess that what I'm asking is, will this preclude us from staying within our goals for our debt policy that we just adopted, given all the other things we also want to do?
Well, I don't think it has to. I think it's certainly workable to do it the way that it's structured and talking about that, because the amount that we would go to bond for would be made up of two things. It would be our contribution, and we could bond that or not bond it, because obviously we're going to have a piece of that, whatever the value of the property is that we get in return. And then the rest of it is what's not done in fundraising by PFARs, and we would structure it so that that increase of debt service for that portion of it would be their annual payment to us, and it's really going to be just the amount that they can't do in fundraising. And as Bob had mentioned, I think earlier, we could structure that debt in several different ways. I mean, if they're going to be able to pay that off sooner than, say, 15 years, and they wanted to structure something faster than that and be able to pay that off on a yearly basis, then, we could certainly do that too. We'd have to get some permissions at local finance board.
Because we've run into that where the pool can't pay down early, correct? I mean,
That's correct.
Right.
That was a whole different setup and structure, though. This is a little bit different, and I think because we're the ones having to just make up the difference. Instead, the pool project was our project, and the outside entity was going to, raise funds and give to us for that project. So this is more of a collaboration, I think, and probably even a little more putting the onus on PFARs for the majority of it.
And Joe, we'll actually have a number of months to raise money before we're going to be ready to spend money to actually work on the site, because we have architects already retained, so we have to design the building now. So over the amount of time it's going to take to design the building, do civil work on the site, things like that, we'll be out fundraising. So by the time we come back to the municipality and say, here's what the building is actually going to cost, and oh, by the way, we need the money December 15th, January of 2015, or February, whatever it's going to be, March, who knows. But we'll have several months of fundraising behind us, so we're going to be able to come to you and say, here's the value of the 3 properties, here's how much money we raised. So we're going to hope to, we don't want to come back to you and say we need a $6 million bond. That's not our intention. Our intention is to say we already have so much money committed coming in from the fund drive, so we want to bring that, to whatever number we can to lower that. So that's what we're going to try to do, and we'll have some time to do it.
Yep. Scott, do you want to add in?
Thanks, Scott. Is this on? Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to sit here and say that with blinders on. It will impact our debt levels, and it will impact our debt service. It's all a question of just what's the size of of the amount that the town is going to have to borrow to turn over. I think that it all depends on how much they raise and how much the facility costs. And that's exactly why you set up the policy like this, so that you could look at these things through the lens of how much are we really borrowing and can we really afford the risk. I'm not saying that we can't afford the risk. I'm just saying that that's why we set it up, so that we have a framework in which to look at that. And, it's all going to depend on what the numbers are. But if they wind up coming to the town asking for a lot of money without a lot of contributions coming in, then it's going to be more rather than less, obviously. There is enough room for a $3.6 million borrowing within this policy, as long as that's the number and it's something that reasonably can be repaid in a reasonable time.
Thanks, Scott. Bob, are we really not working at at the facility? There's nothing going on there now? I see.
Not really. I mean, we're selling bags out of that right now, the leaf bags by the bazillion. And we did utilize it a little bit this winter because we had it like for vehicles. When we had a big snow, we could back them in there. But the intention is not to have to use it again.
And there's the gasoline that's...
The gasoline tank will need to be relocated, and that's an issue that we've got to figure out where that's going to go. And
do you anticipate there's anything on that property that would prevent us from building on that?
Other than the remediation that we need to do from a former leaky tank. No, that's it. I mean, and that's really just excavation and disposal.
And have you talked to the state at all about access on 206? Have we broached the subject about whether that's...
I don't know that Bob actually broached it, but we've had discussions with our engineer's office, and that's something we need to do. Absolutely need to do.
Great.
Ms. Grumler? Yeah, I just want to say I'm very supportive of this project. I'm really happy with the location. I think it's the perfect location. And I'm excited about it, so I do support it. I mean, I hope that we can work out the financing, and we have to check all the numbers. I've always thought I've never understood why emergency services aren't covered by taxes and why it's still separate, because we can't live without it. What would we do? I've never understood that, so I am very supportive.
There's also, I think, and you guys didn't mention it, but I'm sure there could be naming rights if someone stepped up. I'm just saying, if someone stepped up with $3 million or $4 million, I can't see why you can't name the building, the Bob Brusheye.
I was going to say the Liberman building, but no, will not be the Bob Brusheye building.
I'm just saying, if anybody's listening, I mean, there may be someone willing to do that.
Good plug, thanks, Lance.
So, what do you want from us tonight? Do we need a motion to?
Not really. I think I see that there's a lot of support there. Mark and I will polish up the MOU, and we'll get it back to you, the first open agenda that we can get it on in April. And then, we'll have some other numbers hopefully fine-tuned so we can answer some questions, and we're off to the races.
Will we have information, somewhat detailed information about those properties that you currently own? Particularly, I'm kind of interested in those homes.
Yeah, I hope that we should have the appraisal reports within the next couple of weeks, and we'll forward those over to Bob.
Great. Include them in the MOU. Great. Thank you.
I've told you this idea before, but I think that you should have a ball in the governor's mansion as a fundraiser. Because we don't have a big ball in our town.
I wanted to just add my thanks for getting this put together, and I agree with Ms. Krummeller that I think it's a great idea for a site and something that probably wouldn't have been possible without consolidation, because the township would have still be using that space. So it was good creative thinking, and I know there's details to be worked out, there always are, but I think we're in a good position now to move forward. So Thank you.
Thank you all. We appreciate it.
Thanks to the whole squad for coming out too and showing your support. And thank you for all the work you do for the town. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
you ready?
I'm ready.
I'm going to welcome back Kathy Monzo and Sandra Webb to walk us through the budget. Sorry to have bounced you
That's
before,
okay.
but
No.
they brought more of an entourage than you two.
Yeah,
So.
We have Bob Gregory.
Okay. All right, we'll get started here.
Okay, the budget that you have for introduction this evening is a $59 million budget. We have it's about $2 million less than our first consolidated budget from last year. Most of the reductions were in the up to cap amount and also in the reserve for uncollected taxes. This budget currently maintains all of the current services that we provide, and we've even increased some additional services. A couple of weeks ago, you approved a surplus policy, and this budget maintains the surplus reserves for the future, not growing them too much, kind of stabilizing things for us. And the current tax rate will be maintained for 2014 as it was for 2013 at 0.453. So in developing this budget that we've put together with CFAT's assistance, it's a conservative budget. Again, there are some areas where we've seen some savings, a couple of them that I already mentioned. Again, the tax rate is flat, and we have taken into consideration our fund balance and our debt management policies that were approved just a couple of weeks ago. If you look at the budget trends back from 2010, 11, and 12, if we were continuing on the cycles of both where the borough was and the township were before we consolidated, you could see that the budget trends were starting to increase a little bit. And what we have seen for the 13 budget and also 14, we had a reduction in 13 from both of our combined 2012 budgets. And again, this budget is about $2 million less than the 2013 budget. So, you know, consolidation is working. We're seeing our budgets stabilize and seeing some decreases as well.
Okay, we had very few increases in this budget, but there were a few. We have settled a contract with the PBA. We still have two other contracts that we're negotiating with. We also had in one area, a couple areas throughout the salary and wage, a shift back from getting away from capitalizing some salaries. We had a lengthy discussion about that at Citizens Finance, and there were, particularly in engineering, we used to do that if we could attach the salaries. We did that as a practice sometimes both in the township and in the borough, and we did it also that first year of consolidation. So this, we wanted to start shifting away from that, have our current fund operation really pay for the operation. Even if, you know, we can attach the salaries to a particular capital project, this went hand in hand with our debt management policy as well that you all just approved recently. The utilities expense, the electric, the gas, all of those are very often a guess, so those went up a little bit slightly in the budget because we budgeted to actual. We had some expenses that were a little bit over what our budget was last year. And also there was an increase in IT, and this again was a shift. Partially it was due to a shift of what used to be a capital expenditure that we pulled back into our current fund budget. It was our email licensing. So as you all know, we went to a new email. So this is moving that budget really from capital to operating. We had some decreases in the budget as well. As Sandy had mentioned earlier, we took a hard look at our reserves and contingencies that we had built in the budget. As you know, those go towards helping to keep your surplus healthy. Well, what it had done for several years in there was actually increase our surplus. So in an effort to kind of flatten that, stabilize it, not grow the surplus, but still have healthy reserves so that, you know, we still are financially stable and we get the AAA ratings from the rating agencies, we did adjust those reserves. So we'll have to see how that outcome plays out over the next couple of years, and that'll be something that we'll continue to monitor each year as we go forward. We reduced the budget for garbage collection. Last year, we weren't quite sure how that was going to go since it was the first year, extending it to the consolidated municipality. So this one, based it on actual, but actually has a little extra in there over actual last year. Again, a conservative estimate, but not quite as conservative as it was last year. So we have 1 year under our belt. We've sort of based it on that. We had a 1-year emergency in last year's budget appropriation. That was for Hurricane Sandy. So this year, we obviously don't have to have that in there. That's required to be raised all in 1 year. It was raised last year. We also had a small reduction in our health insurance. It wasn't the rates that went down. They went up slightly. It was varied, but it was anywhere from around 4 to 9%, depending on the different policies. But our employee contribution, the amount that they pay for that goes towards their health insurance, that's increased quite a bit this year. So that's actually had a reduction in that budget. Here we have our pie chart that breaks down. Go ahead, Sandy, why don't you?
Sure. As you can see from the pie chart, the debt service seems to be the biggest slice of the pie there, coming in at around 19% of our total budget. After that, we included public safety to include dispatch, fire, and emergency management. That comes in at around 16%. Insurance and pensions, which we do not have a whole lot of control over, comes to about 13% of our total budget. The next piece of the pie that came in was the infrastructure and operations. That includes all the roads, the trash collection, the vehicle maintenance, and also the sewer operating, and that was about 10%. The reserve for uncollected, which we've mentioned a few times, and the up-to-cap contingency are 8% of our budget, and then sewer and the library both come in at about 7%, and the sewer portion is completely offset with revenues that we collect on the sewer billings.
On the revenue side, the amount of surplus we used, that stayed the same as last year. Again, we looked at that in conjunction with the adjusting of the reserves and where our surplus ended up last year. So it looks like our projections were pretty good last year on where our surplus was going to be. And in fact, it's a little bit higher than we were projecting. And but we're keeping the amount of surplus that we use the same because we've adjusted some of those other reserves. We're still, again, using utility operating surplus from our parking utility. Municipal court fees were down slightly, and so we can only anticipate what we actually collected last year, so it was down a little bit below budget. But we'll see if, we obviously had a little bit of a disruption there last year, so that may account for it. It may not happen this year. And again, we're using capital surplus this year. We're not using quite as much as we used last year, but we still do have a reserve of capital surplus that we plan on proposing to use in some future years to kind of soften any debt service increases, so that we don't have too much of a hit, if any, in some of the years going forward. Here's this is you or me? Oh, sorry. Our sources of revenue. You can see, of course, that the big chunk is our reliance on our local tax. So that's a little over 50%. State aid that we get is about 4% of our budget. That's remained flat for several years. Last year, we had a one-time revenue from the state for our consolidation costs, but that's not in there this year, of course. And local fees, like our licenses, our municipal court fees, fire inspection fees, those type of things, that makes up about 5% of our budget. Fund balance coming in as a revenue is about 10% of the budget. And again, our surplus balances are remaining stable, we hope, and we're projecting that they're going to remain about stable with the levels that we've put in this year. Oh, okay.
That's okay.
And the goal really is to, kind of monitor that fund balance. Again, particularly as you've now adopted a policy for surplus, we want to make sure we're continuing to monitor that, and then that'll even help us project even further out so that we can really put some projections in place and know the path that we're going. But the current levels are healthy, and they'll, of course, help us remain, keep our AAA bond rating. That's this one. You were going to do this?
Yeah. So we have the fund balance. This is just really a snapshot which shows you where we've been over the last 10 years, shows some averages on here. We're going to talk a little bit more about surplus and use of surpluses when we have our budget workshop and keeping in mind the new policies that we've established. So we'll come back and we'll have some further dialogue on the fund balance. The utility operating surplus, this is for our parking utility, which is all of our parking, our meters, our parking garage, any lease agreements that we have in place. The parking revenue continues to be a valued source to offset costs in the parking budget. I mean, it's certainly self-sufficient. There have been fund balances at the end of every year, so it's a good, healthy utility. The budget is about $4 million. This budget includes the operations of the parking garage, the staffing, the meter staff, and their debt service. In addition, it also, as Kathy mentioned, we turn over about $1.4 million to the operating budget to keep the taxes stable there. And this and all the reserves make up about 7% of this budget revenue.
Another revenue that we mentioned are the sewer fees, which of course are based on actual water usage of people throughout the town. So, and these are shown as a separate tax on your tax bill, so that comes in for that. The sewer fees completely offset all of the costs that we have for sewer, and we do an analysis on that each year too to make sure that all of the debt service for I&I, all of the staffing, everything is covered through those fees. And that actually makes up about 12% of the total budget. And again, we're going to have to look this year to see if we're going to need a rate adjustment. We're not sure yet because we just got the usage numbers in recently. So we'll be back to you on that. So, which brings us to our biggest revenue really, which is our local taxes. So we have a heavy reliance on our local tax revenue. The amount to be raised in this budget is $30.7 million, and then we also have a revenue of delinquent taxes in there of about $1.2 million. Even though we're very reliant on this, your total tax bill, as you're aware, that only is really less than 25% of it makes up the local amount. The rest of it are for the county and the school taxes that everyone pays. So 46% of the budget revenue is really made up of all those other fees and reserves and other sources of revenue that we get in. But again, it's a heavy reliance on our local purpose tax. So it's a credit that you all have wanted a goal of keeping that stable, in fact, or trying to reduce it when we can. So I'm thankful, and I think that consolidation, even though we had done it for several years prior to consolidation in both the separate towns, we kept the tax rate about the same. I think consolidation really helped in that respect. We're stronger financially for it, and that's reflective in our tax rate.
And so what we've shown in this next slide is 2009 through 2012 is a weighted average of our blended tax rate before we were consolidated. And you can see from 12 to 13 there was a tax decrease, and we're keeping the tax rate level for 2014 at the same as it was for 2013.
And just to wrap up real quick, this was a slide we actually had in last year's budget. And we talked about some of the things we wanted to do for future operating budgets, and I thought it was appropriate to put it back up because I think we can give yourself all an A because you can check off every single one of those things that we talked about doing. So restructuring the labor agreements, which we haven't finished them all yet, but we have a lot of changes recommended in there, so we can check that off. You developed your debt management policy, and of course maintaining the AAA rating. You can check that off. You created a policy for your surplus, and that really takes into consideration your financial health and all of your reserve balances, and And for the first time ever, we'll get to this right after we do the operating budget, but you're at the same time doing your capital budget plan, your 6-year plan, a real one, at the same time that you're doing your operating budget. So you really have an overall good picture of everything. So I just wanted to give you a congratulations on that. You were able to, since last year, accomplish all of those financial goals that you wanted to do for your future budgets. And that's it. If we have any questions or comments?
Yeah, Mr. Lieberman?
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was very well done. Question I have, should we be worried? I know that, we've been mentioning the whole debt ratio, but is 19%, and I see Scott here, is 19% of this budget something that we should be, I hate to use the word worried or concerned, or do we see it as a manageable debt load for a town our size and a town that is continuing to grow and thrive and one of the most desirable places in the state of New Jersey?
Well, I think it's certainly something that you have to look at. Should we be worried? I don't think so. That, again, when you look at what the rating agencies have reported in the past, that's been one of the things that they talked about, that we seem to have a pretty high debt ratio. So this is one of the things that's been talked about a lot, and Scott might want to also comment on this as well, but CFAC has looked at this for in a lot of different ways, sort of even benchmarking us or comparing us to other AAA communities, to other communities at large. It's still difficult. When you take two communities and put them together in a consolidation like we did, you're going to end up with double the debt. And there's some other, oddities in there, like the shared services and the capital that we did back and forth, so that kind of inflated that number a little bit. I think that you've taken a huge step with the debt management policy, and that it takes into consideration that level being in an acceptable range, and certainly puts, the focus on, and it may take many, many years, Lance, to bring that number down to something, because it took many, many years to build up to that number as well. So, but when you're talking about long-term financing, it's going to take a little while to make some changes. But our goal is to, bring that down lower so that we can finally get, a check plus in that from the rating agencies. But it's going to take a long time.
And just to piggyback on that, what number would be desirable? I'm just asking.
I'm going to ask on that one. I don't know. We looked at a lot of different benchmarking. I don't think that, and even the rating agencies won't give you a, here's the ideal number. But what was the range we ended up with in our policy?
We didn't have a range, I think, percent of revenues or percent of appropriations. But,
okay.
Can you use the mic? Sorry.
We didn't recommend a range of, for debt service as a percent of revenues or a percent of appropriations. It is high relative to a lot of other communities, but they still gave us a AAA with it being where it is, and I think it's probably because we have shown that we can manage it and do manage it. I think that it would be unwise to let it grow, but I don't think that the capital plan that you're going to see and the things that we've done will permit that to happen without a conscious decision by you all.
I'd just like to throw one other last thing in there. When you start to look at neighboring communities, because there'll be a lot of, budgets being introduced, in the area now, our community is old. And you have to reinvest back into the community. And I think that's why our budget has gotten where it has from a capital expenditure standpoint. And you have a very aggressive parks program that a lot of municipalities don't have. You just did a $6 million pool or $5 million pool. And the amount of roads and infrastructure that we have in this community warrant a huge investment. And so I think that's why when you look on paper and you look at a West Windsor or a Montgomery that are relatively new communities, or a Hopewell, their infrastructure is young. It's baby. It's only been there for 20 years, 25 years, where, we're uncovering sewer lines that have been in the ground for 50, 60, 70 years and have to replace them. So I just keep that in mind. I mean, it is high. I agree with Scott wholeheartedly that if you look at it from a comparison standpoint, and the benefit to having the plan is you making decisions as to what you see as your priorities. And that's really, to me, the benefit of the plan. And it also gives you a little bit of a knowledge base to say, hey, we need to do these things for our community to keep it Princeton.
Ms. Beller? Question?
Thank you.
Going back to the consolidation report, I think that there was an estimate that our savings would be around $3 million in year 3, and about 2/3 of that was expected to come from a reduction in the police force. And I think that we are below the year 3 projection. I think, as I recall what the numbers were, I think we're already below where we expected to be year 3. And so if 2/3 of our savings were supposed to come, should we have a couple $1 million savings, and where is that, and why are we not having a reduction in our taxes? Why are we not projecting?
Well, I think when you look at the consolidation, and actually we wanted to address a lot of this stuff and do some comparison and templates, and then also compare it to the consolidation report at our budget workshop. But to give a quick answer, I think that we're there in terms of the staffing reduction in the numbers, but not necessarily the proposed positions that may have been reduced. So the dollar amounts may be slightly different. And obviously in the meantime too, we have to adjust that for any other increases that we ended up giving in the contract, because we did not build that into that I recall into the estimates.
There were no raises built into the...
I don't recall what it is, so I don't want to tell you the wrong thing. But let's, I don't think so, right?
Oh.
It was all done in, if it was 2011, it was done in 2011 dollars, assuming 2011 salaries. So it did not assume any projection forward of salary rates, salary increases, and we've had, last year there were raises given out, general raises given out, and the police force just renegotiated a contract that had substantially higher rates, so not substantially higher, but increased rates.
Right.
So there are, the normal salary increases that are going on. The head count, I think that you'll find the head counts are where they were supposed to be, certainly on the police department.
Yes.
I know that.
And that was the big...
So it's salaries and other costs going up, pensions going up, the healthcare's gone up a little bit, and other things have just moved around a little. I think that as we go through the analysis over the next couple of weeks, and we have workshops, et cetera, that's one of the goals, is to pin those numbers down and say, here's how it compares. But that's really the next step.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Howard? So I want to follow up on Councilwoman Butler's point, Kathy, and make sure I understand. So we're at 52, if you look at Captain Sutter's report, we're at 52 on the force, and the TTF envisioned us getting down to 51 eventually, so we're close to that goal. But was what you're saying is that it's the salaries because we have a lot of more people in management than we wanted to have, and when we assumed a force of 51, we didn't assume as many in management, right? And so it's more money on salaries than for that size of a force. Is that what you're saying? Yes, that's part of it. So, but we really do need to get it back to those base numbers and to say, here's the staffing numbers that have been reduced and how it compares to what was recommended, and then here's in those dollar amounts too, to see, how much we're off or not. I mean, there's no question, I don't want anybody to go away, that we've had savings and they're sustainable as a result of consolidation. So we just want to make sure that we're targeting those and reporting on those in the same terms that they were reported. So we'll do that at our budget workshops.
Okay, thank you.
And I just had a clarifying question too. There's still going to be changes probably that come in this document because we don't know if there's going to be additional revenues, if there's, just for example, if there's a higher payment from Princeton University, and I don't think that the storm costs were put in here at this point yet either. So you'll come back to us with amendments as we go through the process?
I think as we go through and have budget workshops, and you all have questions that come up that we address and answer, that you're going to have changes to this. And so, yes, we will certainly prepare an amendment after all of those changes are decided. So there is not anything in there for capital expenditures as a result of the storm. So I know that you all talked about that at the last meeting, about some road repairs. So that's not taken into consideration in here. But yes, we also may have changes in either appropriation line items or in any revenue line items that are coming in also.
Okay. And the workshop you're talking about, is that with the entire council? Are you talking about small groups of us or both? Or
Well, my hope was, I know that you added a meeting for April 21st, and I thought that that was going to be possibly earmarked for a budget workshop. If that's the case, that would be great. We could have staff come and give their brief reports that I thought, because I thought I'd rather leave more time for you all to ask questions of them, and they can cover their operating and their capital budget requests. So a lot of that discussion can take place then, if that's okay.
Okay, I know there's a desire by the Ordinance Review Committee to have a meeting in that time too. So we'll figure that out between now and the April 7th meeting of
And we can always schedule the budget workshops, at any time. So we can try to find, a better time if you'd rather have that meeting because I know all the work you're doing on that too, and I agree with you, it needs a special meeting as well. So, but we can do it anytime between now and we're proposed to adopt on April 28th at your meeting that day. So we'd have to have budget workshops in enough time prior to that to do an amendment. And if we don't, it's not set in stone. We can always push the adoption out further to give us time. If we have to advertise the amendment, we need a little bit of time to do that as well. And you'll have to have a public hearing on an amendment if there's big changes.
Okay. And we have on the agenda tonight, we have the ordinance to exceed the budget appropriation limit. Should we do that now and introduce the municipal budget now, and then we'll move on to the capital?
That sounds good.
Okay. Yeah.
Just a brief comment. I don't have any comment on the substance of the budget at this point, but I do have a comment on the fact that several departments are identified as joint agencies.
Yeah, I know.
And I don't think we have them anymore.
You're absolutely right.
And when we were working on the budget, we caught a couple, but we were working on it so diligently that I think we missed a few.
Yeah, we missed quite a few.
We'll clean them up.
We'll clean that up. You're talking about the budget.
For instance, something was identified as borough share.
Yeah, I know. I saw that one too, so.
Yeah, so I think we ought to try and remove all of those if we can.
We will, thank you.
Right.
Yes, why don't we take the first one first, the ordinance introduction, if there's a motion for the Princeton calendar year 2014 ordinance to exceed the municipal budget appropriation limits and to establish a cap bank.
So moved.
Second.
And can you just, before we vote on it, can you just explain what this is to the public listening?
This is the spending cap, and so I think I explained it last year. I think this has been in place, this statute, since 1976. It caps certain expenditures from increasing from year to year in your budget. Each year, the division sets that allowable amount. And so the allowable amount this year is 0.5% over last year, but they also allow you to increase it up to 3.5% if you pass this ordinance. Now, we're nowhere near our 3.5% cap. In fact, we've backed off the cap almost $2 million, I think. So you don't have to increase it to cover your cap expenditures. But what it does do is allow you to bank the amount that you don't use in case you come upon a year in the next 1 or 2 years that you do have to exceed the amount that you're allowed, and you're then allowed to use your cap bank. We obviously would notify you if that were the case. It generally isn't the case, and we are usually well under our spending cap even without the limit. But this, the state requires you to do this if you want to bank the difference. So this really just establishes our cap bank.
Okay, thank you. And that was, did you move it? Moved by Mr. Liverman and seconded by Mr. Miller. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Cron-Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. And the public hearing for this ordinance will be at the meeting of April 28th. And next is Resolution 14-77, resolution to introduce the 2014 municipal budget. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
It's moved by Ms. Butler and seconded by Ms. Crummler. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that resolution passes unanimously. And now we can move on to the 6-year capital plan.
We don't have a real presentation for this. You got a packet. In your packet was a summary sheet on the top that showed pretty much by department or area the amounts for each year's capital plan. We included in the summary sheet 2013s just so that you could see what was done last year, and then 2014 what's proposed. I think the grand total was around a little over 9 million, and then the other years going out, and then the details supported behind it. So I don't imagine that you've had enough time to take a look at this, to have specific questions. And again, I would suggest that, you might have a lot more questions when we have our budget workshops. And this tonight is in no way, if you introduce it, it's not approving these, and it's not even the approval when you do the capital ordinance, but it starts the process so that then you can have a review before you would adopt this plan.
Okay, but the resolution says that we're approving the attached capital budget and the 6-year capital plan. So should we wait to do that then, if we're going to be making changes?
I think this is just the introduction tonight. So no, you can't approve it anyway, really officially, until you approve your operating budget as well. They sort of go hand in hand.
Okay.
So this, you would outline, I think the resolution says it includes the introduction and adoption, but that's the statute talks about introduction and adoption. So, but you have to have those two separate steps.
Okay. And then, can we just take a step back and have you explain, this is supposed to be a document that gets refreshed every year, but that I think it's council sense that if there's an item that's not on this list for the current year that's not an emergency, then we would not consider it for capital expenditure that year.
Well, we've done this plan and asked for, department's best plan for over the next 6 years. Obviously, things are going to happen or come up that may not have been considered. That's with any budget that you deal with, whether it's your operating budget or whether it's your capital budget. And certainly, the process would be if you introduced your capital plan and then you adopted your capital plan on April 28th, like you did, you do your operating budget as well, and then you even did an ordinance for the year for all of these. You would have to consider any future capital requests or anything outside of this alongside of what you already approved in here. And, so it doesn't preclude you from doing that, but you have to take a look at what that impact would be. So when we put this together, and you'll see down the bottom that there's sources of funding, and obviously the biggest source of funding are the bonds and notes, which turn into your debt service. So we ran the schedules for the next 6 years also on what this debt service would look like, and that's what Citizens Finance Group and the Finance Subcommittee have been looking at, in terms of what can we afford, and what does that look like in debt service, and that helped formulate the parameters for your debt management plan. So you certainly have to, I think, anytime anybody comes to you with a capital request, the first question is going to be, is that in the capital plan? And if not, then you have to figure out what are the options for that. Do you want to take on additional debt? Do you have other sources to fund it besides borrowing money? or do you replace something that's in the plan with something that is necessary and you have to add? So I think those are going to end up being your options along the way. And you have to consider each one as they come along and hope that, what's in the plan is something that's, reasonable at this point, and they have a reasonable expectation that this is what they need for capital.
And also, when we approve this plan, it's not agreeing to
do it.
Everything on here.
No.
Each individual item will have to come back before council.
It will. This is not the authorization to spend. Even when you adopt this plan on April 28th, it's still not the authorization to spend. The authorization to spend would come after that in the form of an ordinance. And that's when you approve an ordinance, that's the authorization to spend. So that's the time that you would have to say, yes, we agree that this is going to be done. And it may not include anything. And for the items going forward, years going forward, as I think Council President Bernie Miller had said, this is kind of a rolling document, a rolling plan, because you're going to have to adjust things. Next year when we come to you, some of the items in the future years may change. And, so we're constantly going to be updating this in years going forward, and to make sure, and we'll have to make adjustments accordingly. So,
one of the things I noticed, and then I'll get to Ms. Howard, was that there's, just if you look under the library, there's a lot of these rows that are all zeros, and I don't know if that's because the expenditure got pushed out past 6 years, or if there's a phantom list here, or there's some sort of thing that Excel did, but I would just check, there's a whole list of them.
In those cases, it's really only a one-time expense, so the zeros are showing up in the years that, the amount will show up in the year where the expense is.
Yeah, but there's no, it's zero across the whole entire.
Well, this document also included 2013, so it's possible there was something for 2013 that you're not seeing on this.
I just didn't collapse because your summary sheet has 2013, but your detail sheet doesn't, so.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why.
Ms. Howard?
Yes, I had a question. I see in some places here you have vehicle replacements as capital, right? You're listing.
Yes.
But you don't have anything under police related to vehicle, and that's one of the main recommendations from the accrediting body, is that we have some serious fleet.
There's actually money in the operating budget because they don't allow you to capitalize police patrol vehicles. Mm-hmm. So some police vehicles you can if they're considered a command unit and a response to that type of thing, but you'll see in the detail for the operating budget.
So you're doing that through operating, but then when health needs new cars, you do that through capital?
That's correct.
Or whatever, I'm just seeing different ones here.
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Miller?
I have a question about our ability to compare 2013 and 2014 expenditures. To look at engineering, for example, 2013, 1.6 million, 2014, 3.59 million, and when we go to the backup, the 2013 numbers aren't there, so it makes it a little difficult to compare.
Yeah, that's an oversight on my part. I think I was trying to get it all to fit, so I must have squished out 2013 in the detail. So I can provide that to you. But I'll just say that if you look at the grand total for 2013 versus every other year that we have in the plan, 2013 was a little bit of an oddity in that we didn't do a whole lot of capital purchasing or spending last year, and I think it was really the new consolidation, still a lot of work to do on consolidation, so it wasn't quite business as usual, and probably the first thing that goes are some of the big projects that anybody would do, particularly roads and that type of thing. So, but you can see on the years going forward, he got right back in the swing of things, so we have a lot planned coming up, a lot of work.
Okay. And I have a technical question just here about what resolution we're going to be voting on. So it's, there's a resolution that's attached to the 6-year plan, but I don't see a separate resolution for the 2014 capital budget unless I'm missing something, but it's listed on the agenda.
Well, this was kind of a makeshift one, but if you look back at your resolution for the municipal operating budget, it actually has wording in there that includes your capital plan, but so most municipalities do them all together. I knew that you all wanted to have a separate kind of discussion on that, so I just kind of pulled it out and separated it into this other resolution. You could turn this one into your resolution to introduce your capital budget.
I
don't know what number it is.
This, the capital budget today? I mean, I understand that we really are compelled to do the budget. Are we, but this, I kind of would like to.
But are we,
time on it.
I guess I'm confused because it's being presented as a resolution, but it's really part of the ordinance, so, or not?
No, it's not. It is a separate resolution for your capital plan. So.
Okay. So if we want to make changes to it, we should wait to, because this isn't a two-step process like the...
It is. It is a two-step process. It's just like your operating budget. It's a two-step process. It's introduction and then adoption. Even though it's a resolution, it's still done that way. It's because it's the budget.
Okay. And are we supposed to do it tonight because of the state calendar? Or
Well, you are because it's part of the state document, so, but you absolutely can change anything in there. And so before we adopt on April 28th, and then even after that, when we go to put the ordinances in place, if there's something that you want to change or you don't want in there, we don't do the ordinance. So, there's no harm.
So you want a motion to introduce?
Right. So this 14-78 resolution to introduce the 2014 capital budget.
So moved.
Second.
It was introduced by Ms. Butler and seconded by Mr. Miller. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and there'll be a public hearing for this also on April 28th.
Okay.
And in the meantime, we'll figure out the dates for the budget workshop. So thank you very much. I know this is a tremendous amount of work that's gone into it, and I want to thank Scott Sillers and who's like a honorary member of the staff at this point, and the Citizens Finance Advisory Committee. So thank you for everyone's hard work. Let's see, now we're on to reports. So Captain Sutter?
Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome.
Before I get into the monthly report, I had a couple announcements I wanted to make. I wanted to start with advising everyone of a really proud event in our brief history. We were granted official accreditation status last Thursday. Lieutenant Morgan, Sergeant Riccatello, and I appeared before the State Commission on Accreditation, went through a summary of our findings of our on-site, some questioning, and we received a unanimous vote for approval. And the best part of it for me was, that was great, but they made a statement of, for the record, that most departments have taken 2 to 3 years to achieve for the program to take place, and we did it in one after a huge consolidation, which was a huge project. So that relates directly back to the officers and a buy-in, a buy-in into the program, and it's just something for us to be proud of, so I wanted to announce that tonight.
Yeah, congratulations.
Congratulations.
This is a huge accomplishment. I remember when they came to, they commented that had they not known, they would not have known that the department had just consolidated, and that was a pretty amazing statement for them to have made.
It really
and I think
was
it's a testament to your leadership and everybody in the department and their hard work.
Thank you. And so, changing gears, I have a couple public safety announcements I wanted to make as well. You may have read recently, we've had I don't want to call it a rash, but we've had some incidents of home burglaries in Princeton and in the surrounding jurisdictions, being all our bordering towns and outward in the county and in Somerset County. In 5 weeks, we've experienced 6 residential burglaries. Some were with forced entry and some were through open doors and open windows. The majority were that way. And they're all in the daytime when the home is unoccupied. But the thing that we wanted to get out was, A, to be aware of your home, that it's locked and that everything is secure. B, we are working some leads in the case, and we want everybody to be aware and to report any suspicious activity in the neighborhood. Cars, people coming to the door, knocking on the door, possibly posing as salespeople. We're gonna release more specific information to the public tomorrow in a press release and on social media, but we're gonna need the public's vigilance and reporting to us, because that's really the best way for us to bring these to a conclusion. And again, there's no real area of town either. They're sporadic. They've been in the far west, the east. They're kind of all over the place. So they're not concentrated as they've been in the past when we've had these kind of incidents. So again, we're just asking for some attention from our community to that.
Can we ask a question about
yes.
this right now?
Sure.
What are they stealing?
Right now, it's been mostly jewelry and some electronics goods, but they've been mutually exclusive, which is indicative of some things to us, but it's either been one or the other. So we're looking into that, but a lot of the earlier ones were jewelry.
Okay, and I didn't even know that we have a peddler's license, but since we're doing the ordinances, I found out about that. When someone applies for a peddler's license, I mean, has anyone?
We get.
I mean, recently? I mean,
yeah,
well, just because I saw someone in my neighborhood and it looked like they were selling things, and I was just thinking maybe it would be nice if when peddler's license were obtained from the municipality, we were given a little notice so we would know that peddlers were coming around door to door. I mean, but nobody has anyone in the last couple weeks?
I'd have to go and look.
Pardon?
I'd have to go and look in the file.
Oh, so it's often enough that you don't...
There's a lengthy process that they go through.
I know. I mean, but how many apply usually?
It's not an exorbitant amount by any means.
Well, but you bring up an interesting point. That's a key. They should have a license with them if they come to your door. So that's displayed.
Right, because I found that out, and I thought, if they knock on the door, I'm going to ask to see their license.
If they don't, we want to get called.
Yeah.
Staying on the kind of on the public safety thought process here. Earlier last week, Councilperson Butler had notified me of a issue that I followed up on with a member of our community regarding a 911 issue that we rectified fairly quickly, but was something that I wanted to talk about tonight. The person, a member of our community, had made a 911 call from a cell phone in a fairly close proximity to the police department. And the call was routed to Hamilton Township Police Department, which we found out later, and I'll try to explain this further. In any event, when the call was transferred back to our police department through the state 911 system, it was dropped. And that caused concern, obviously, and thank God there was follow-up, and we immediately began to look into it and solved it pretty much in a day through Verizon and the state emergency telecommunications service. There's two things that I guess the public should be aware of. And the first thing is that with regard to cell phone calls to 911, they'll normally be routed correctly, but there's a huge dependence on a variety of issues that deal with the cell towers. And if a cell tower is not in service, or there's an overload on the tower, or the 911 system in that community is backed up at the time, it'll go to a fail-safe. They can't really give us a reason why this one went to Hamilton. The bigger concern, I think, is that when it was transferred, it went to the caller got a message that it was no longer in service, which was hard for us to pretty much fathom because we've never had that before. Long story short, what had happened was when we consolidated our 911 PSAPs, public service answering points, to the former township's old number as we came into this facility. The borough number was discontinued, and that number was taken out of service statewide. This particular public safety answering point in Hamilton did not have that number removed from their system by the state, and it was transferred to the borough number. And they got a no longer in service. So it turned out that we were able to solve it quickly, and thank goodness that there was nobody injured, but it was it was disconcerting, obviously, for the citizen, and it was a good thing we found out about it when we did. So I wanted to make a comment about that.
So have we gone through and make sure that no other places?
We have personally called, thank God, every police department and public safety answering point in Mercer County, Somerset County, surrounding communities, Middlesex County, and then the state has also sent out messages as well as the county. So we've kind of hit it threefold. So we're, at this point, as sure as we can be in Princeton, that the situation was rectified. They've reassured us that it has been.
Can I just comment on that? A couple things. A number of people have mentioned to me that they feel that they have gotten transferred when they call on their cell phone, and most of the time it's been instantaneous, but it is sort of a, I'm going to contradict myself as it not being instantaneous, but it's been seamless, but it is sort of a split second. You go to a second dispatch. So that happens somewhat frequently.
It does happen, it's usually dependent on location. If you're, say, by the canal on the West Windsor border, right, there is a chance that you'll hit a West Windsor tower, for lack of a better word, and it'll go to West Windsor. And those transfers, we do them all the time. We do them out of town, it comes into town, and they happen several times a day, and they're usually seamless. This is the first time I've experienced, well, at least it's come to my attention, that this has occurred.
And I also just want to say I really appreciate that you responded to this so quickly. I know this citizen was really also quite grateful and quite impressed. But also he said that when the police did come out to actually respond to the burglary, they also did a very good job. But really, it was great that we were able to clear this up so quickly, because rightly so, he was concerned that had you were making this and you only had one shot to call 911 to get to a dead line, could have been a life or death situation. So, but you really did a great job. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I have a follow-up on that, too. I know at a previous meeting we talked about how the non-emergency number was being answered by a machine. Is it still? But maybe we would. It's now being. Oh, okay.
Well, it goes to dispatch. There's an auto attendant, is what we discussed last time. But after our last meeting, we met with Bob McQueen and we streamlined and made the changes that we discussed here. And I've gotten a lot of positive feedback on it. That it's much more clear, and the calls are getting routed more appropriately and directly. So
good.
I've gotten positive feedback so far on it. Wanted to discuss also shortly an event that was gotten a lot of publication recently concerning a motor vehicle stop that occurred in Princeton, and it's kind of gone viral around different websites. And I can't make a whole lot of comment about it because we're required to look into it, but I did have a very good conversation with the Human Services Commission earlier or last week about it. Actually, the day that it took place, I happened to be there. And I just wanted to say, if you've seen the video and you've read the headline, they really tell two different stories. And there was a lot of tremendous work that took place by that officer on that motor vehicle stop. Without getting into specifics,